Have you ever held a simple coin in your hand and wondered if it carries more than just face value? Wondered if behind its metallic shine lies a story that connects history, politics, economics, and art together? The 1973 Washington quarter is one such coin, a piece of American currency that on the surface looks ordinary, yet beneath its ordinary appearance, it holds a history tied to monumental shifts in the nation's monetary system. The Washington quarter itself was first introduced in 1932 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of the birth of George Washington, the first president of the United States. The design chosen for the coin was created by sculptor John Flanagan, whose profile bust of Washington would go on to become one of the most recognizable coin portraits in American history over the years from 1932 up to 1964. The Washington quarter was struck in 90% silver and 10% copper, giving it intrinsic value far beyond its face value, however. The mid-1960s marked a massive turning point in the story of the American quarter. The United States faced a nationwide coin shortage caused by rising silver prices and hoarding by the public. In response, the government passed the Coinage Act of 1965, which eliminated silver from circulating dimes and quarters and reduced the silver content in half dollars beginning in 1965. Washington quarters were no longer made from silver but from a clad composition of copper and nickel bonded to a pure copper core. This change forever altered the collecting and economic nature of the quarter, making it essentially a fiat coin tied solely to its spending value and not to the worth of precious metal by 1973. This transition had become firmly established, yet the quarter still remained one of the most widely used coins in American commerce. The 1973 Washington quarter carries the same design details that Flanagan originally created decades earlier. The obverse features the bust of George Washington facing left with the word liberty inscribed above his head, and the motto, "In God We Trust," placed to the left of his neck. The date 1973 appears directly below Washington's bust, reminding collectors and historians of the exact era when this coin was minted. The reverse side of the quarter displays the majestic heraldic eagle with outstretched wings, clutching a bundle of arrows symbolizing defense. While an olive branch beneath represents peace, above the eagle appear the words, United States of America, and directly below the denomination quarter dollar. What makes the 1973 Washington quarter particularly fascinating is its placement within the broader context of American coinage in the 1970s. The early part of the decade was marked by major financial challenges, including inflation and changes in currency policy, as the United States moved fully away from the gold standard under President Richard Nixon. In 1971, the dollar was no longer backed by precious metals, meaning that coins like the quarter became purely fiduciary instruments, supported entirely by government authority and public trust. Thus, the 1973 quarter represents a snapshot of America in transition, a country redefining the meaning of its money in terms of production. The Philadelphia and Denver mints were the main facilities striking circulation quarters in 1973. Philadelphia produced coins without a mint mark, while Denver coins carried the D-mint mark placed to the right of Washington's ponytail ribbon. These circulation strikes were produced in the hundreds of millions, reflecting the massive demand for quarters in commerce at the time. Additionally, the San Francisco Mint produced special proof coins for collectors. These proof coins carried the S-Mint mark and were struck with polished dies and planchets, giving them a mirrored finish that stood in stark contrast to the matte appearance of regular business strike coins. Collectors often look at the 1973 Washington quarter, not for its metallic content since it contains no silver, but for its historical placement within the numismatic timeline. Coins of this year may be found in relatively high grades, given the large numbers minted and the relatively recent nature of their production. However, coins preserved in mint state condition, especially those graded by professional services, can hold added value, while proof specimens from San Francisco often display exceptional quality and sharp details that attract numismatists. Another layer of interest in the 1973 quarter involves error coins. As with all coinage, certain production mistakes slip through the minting process and reach circulation. These errors can include off-center strikes, double dies planché, flaws, and clipped planchets. Collectors have found 1973 quarters with striking errors that increase their desirability and value far beyond face value. Some error coins can be worth hundreds of dollars, depending on rarity and demand from a cultural perspective. The Washington Quarter of 1973 also represents continuity in American symbolism throughout times of political and economic upheaval. The portrait of George Washington stood as a steady reminder of national identity, while the eagle on the reverse carried the message of strength and peace. The American public trusted this coin to function in their daily lives during a decade of uncertainty, from the Watergate scandal to the energy crisis and rising inflation. The story of the 1973 Washington Quarter is not merely the story of a coin. It is the story of a nation, a reflection of its values, its struggles, and its resilience. When you hold this coin, you hold a piece of history that has passed through countless hands over the past half-century. It may have paid for a gallon of gas in the early 70s or helped a child buy candy at the corner store. It may have been dropped into a payphone during an emergency or slipped into a jukebox to play a favorite song. Every mark and scratch on a circulated 1973 quarter carries silent testimony to the lives it has touched. For collectors today, the 1973 quarter remains a common but meaningful piece. It is not rare in the way early silver quarters are, yet it represents the closing years of the classic Washington Quarter design, before major modifications and commemorative series arrived in later decades in 1975 and 1976. For example, the United States would temporarily replace the Washington reverse design with the bicentennial drummer boy and torch-bearing design, celebrating 200 years of American independence. This means that the 1973 quarter was one of the last in the uninterrupted sequence of the Eagle reverse quarters before the bicentennial celebration interrupted the pattern. In professional numismatics, the 1973 quarter is studied not for rarity, but for condition. Collectors seek specimens with sharp strikes, full details, and minimal bag marks. Gem mint state examples graded MS65 or higher can be attractive to advanced collectors, while proofs with cameo or deep cameo contrast are especially prized. To fully appreciate the 1973 Washington Quarter, one must understand the broader history of American coinage and the forces that shaped it, from the elimination of silver in 1965 to the economic policies of the Nixon administration and the social changes of the 70s. Each quarter minted in 1973 stands as a witness to history and continues to circulate today, reminding us that even the most ordinary objects can carry extraordinary stories. Imagine holding a piece of American history in the palm of your hand, a simple quarter that to most people is nothing more than 25 cents, but to collectors, historians, and coin enthusiasts alike, the 1982 Washington Quarter tells a much deeper story. It is a coin that sits at the crossroads of major economic changes, minting transitions, and collecting challenges. And once you peel back the surface, you will realize that this particular year carries secrets that make it stand out. Among modern U.S. coinage, to understand the 1982 Washington Quarter, we must step back and look at the broader picture of American coinage history and the role the quarter has played since its first introduction in 1932, the year that marked the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. The quarter was chosen as the denomination to honor the first president of the United States, replacing the standing Liberty Quarter, which had served from 1916 to 1930. The design, by sculptor John Flanagan, placed Washington's bust on the obverse with the word Liberty above and the date below, while the reverse carried the majestic heraldic eagle, clutching arrows and olive branches symbolizing strength and peace. This design would remain largely unchanged for decades, creating one of the most familiar images in American pockets, purses, and cash registers. By the time we reached the year 1982, the United States was going through a period of intense economic transition, inflation challenges rising. Deficits and shifts in fiscal policies under President Ronald Reagan had put pressure on the mint to reduce costs and make production more efficient. For decades, coins had been minted not only for circulation, but also in special, uncirculated, and proof sets for collectors. However, in 1982, the mint made a pivotal decision that would forever affect the desirability and rarity of that year's quarters. It was the first year since 1964 that the mint did not issue traditional mint sets. This meant that collectors had no official uncirculated 1982 Washington quarters directly available in sets, making high-quality specimens difficult to obtain. Today, the 1982 Washington quarter was struck in two major locations, Philadelphia and Denver. The Philadelphia mint coins carried no mint mark, while the Denver mint coins were marked with the familiar D. The San Francisco mint continued its role in striking proofs, but because no standard mint sets were issued, the circulation strikes from Philadelphia and Denver became the primary source for collectors seeking examples in uncirculated condition. This scarcity in pristine form is what makes the 1982 quarter so fascinating and so heavily pursued by numismatists. Another detail that deepens the story of the 1982 quarter is the composition and the broader context of clad coinage. After the United States ended silver coinage for circulation in 1965, quarters were struck in a copper-nickel clad composition with a pure copper core sandwiched between two outer layers of copper-nickel alloy. This remained the case in 1982, but the quality of planchets and the minting process of that era sometimes led to weak strikes and coins with inconsistent details, making sharply struck. 1982, Washington quarters. A true prize to find in high grade. Adding even more intrigue are the varieties known for this year. Among them, the most famous is the 1982 Washington quarter, struck on a planchet meant for a dime, resulting in an undersized coin that collectors value highly. Error coins like these often escape the mint unnoticed and find their way into circulation where sharp-eyed collectors decades later discover them. There are also double-die obverse varieties where lettering or numbers appear doubled, adding another layer of collectability to the 1982 quarter. When discussing the 1982 Washington quarter, it is also essential to explore the cultural and economic environment of the time as it shapes the story of why these coins matter. In the early 1980s, the U.S. economy was facing a severe recession. Unemployment was high, interest rates had soared, and inflation remained a constant threat. Coins like the 1982 quarter circulated in a nation that was tightening belts and adjusting to a new political era, where fiscal conservatism and economic reform were hot topics. As everyday Americans used these coins to buy gasoline, groceries, or newspapers, they became tiny markers of a challenging but transformative time in the nation's history. For collectors today, the 1982 Washington quarter stands as a reminder of how small changes in minting policy can ripple across decades. The decision not to produce mint sets in that year has made gem-quality quarters extremely difficult to source, while circulated examples are plentiful. Finding a 1982 quarter-graded MS-65 or higher can be a real challenge, and such pieces command significant premiums in the numismatic marketplace. Similarly, proofs from San Francisco are more accessible, but circulation strikes from Philadelphia and Denver are where the rarity truly lies. Over the course of 2 hours, we could dive deeper into the production numbers, with Philadelphia striking over 500 million coins and Denver producing similar massive quantities. Yet despite these high mintages, the lack of preserved, uncirculated examples means the true collector population remains limited. We can explore the stories of individuals who found rare errors in pocket change, or inherited rolls of 1982 quarters only to realize years later that they had been sitting on coins worth far more than face value. We can discuss the grading process, how services like PCGS and NGC evaluate the sharpness of the strike, the luster of the coin, the preservation of surfaces, and how these elements determine whether a 1982 quarter is a common piece of pocket change or a rare and valuable treasure. We can also trace the Washington quarter's journey beyond 1982, leading into the later 1990s when the design would finally change with the introduction of the 50-state quarters program. This makes the 1982 coin one of the later classic-era Washington quarters before the explosion of interest and popularity that came with statehood. Designs, by looking backward, we can appreciate how the 1982 quarter represents a bridge between tradition and transformation in American coinage. So when you hold a 1982 Washington quarter, remember that it is more than just a coin. It is a product of a year when the mint broke from tradition, when America was reshaping its economy, and when collectors unknowingly faced one of the most intriguing challenges in modern numismatics, hidden in plain sight among billions of coins, the 1982 Washington quarter continues to spark curiosity, passion, and discovery among those who recognize its deeper story, and as we explore it in depth, we uncover not just the history of a coin, but a reflection of America itself in that moment of time. Imagine holding a small piece of American history right in the palm of your hand, a coin that countless people spent without thought, a coin that bought groceries, paid for gas, passed through toll booths, and jingled in the pockets of workers, students, and families, yet this simple coin minted in 1984 carries with it an extraordinary story, a story that stretches from the birth of the Washington quarter in 1932 to the changes in America's economy, the artistry of its design, the minting technology of the 1980s, and the role it played in everyday American life. What if I told you that your 1984 Washington quarter is far more than just 25 cents? It is a symbol of tradition, resilience, and the ongoing legacy of the nation's first president. Today, we uncover the full, detailed history of the 1984 Washington quarter. The Washington quarter began its journey in 1932 when the United States decided to honor the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. The Treasury and the Commission of Fine Arts debated over the design, eventually selecting John Flanagan's portrait of Washington, which was based on Jean-Antoine Houdon's 1785 neoclassical bust. The obverse displayed Washington's profile with liberty above "In God We Trust" to the left, and the date of issue at the bottom. The reverse featured an eagle with outstretched wings, clutching arrows, symbolizing strength and vigilance resting above olive branches to represent peace. This design remained largely unchanged for decades, becoming one of the most familiar circulating coins in the nation. By 1965, silver was removed from the quarter due to rising metal costs. The mint transitioned to a copper-nickel-clad composition with an inner core of pure copper and outer layers of 75% copper and 25% nickel. The 1984 Washington quarter belongs to this clad era, produced at three major mints: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. The Philadelphia mint coins bore no mint mark. The Denver mint coins carried the D mint mark, and the San Francisco mint produced proof coins with the S mint mark for collectors. The year 1984 in the United States was marked by economic growth following the recession of the early 1980s. President Ronald Reagan was in office. The Summer Olympics were held in Los Angeles, and the country was experiencing a renewed sense of optimism. Coins like the 1984 quarter were part of everyday commerce. Reflecting this period of resurgence, they circulated widely through vending machines, payphones, arcades, and countless daily transactions, serving as both a tool of trade and a silent witness to history. The mintage numbers were significant. Philadelphia struck over 676 million quarters. Denver produced more than 546 million, and San Francisco created over 2 million proof coins. These enormous numbers meant the 1984 quarter was not rare in circulation, but collectors often search for specific varieties and minting errors which can increase a coin's value. Examples include off-center strikes, double Die obverse's weak strikes filled mint marks and coins struck on planchets intended for other denominations. Such errors are treasured because they are the result of the intricate and sometimes unpredictable process of high-speed coin production. The artistry of the 1984 quarter connects back to John Flanagan's original 1932 design, though critics often argued that the details were shallow compared to Laura Garden. Fraser's rejected design, Flanagan's portrait endured for decades, becoming iconic in its own right by 1984. The coin's design had been struck into the national consciousness so strongly that it was a defining part of American coinage. In fact, millions of Americans recognized Washington's profile on the quarter, even more readily than they recognized the portraits on dollar bills. The clad composition of the coin ensured durability. The copper-nickel surface resisted wear better than the softer silver coins of earlier decades, making the 1984 quarters able to withstand years of circulation without losing their legibility or detail. The reeded edge not only discouraged clipping or shaving, but also gave the quarter a distinct tactile identity, making it instantly recognizable by touch alone in pockets. And cash registers across the nation. Collectors often view the 1984 quarter as a representative piece rather than a key date. Yet its significance lies in the way it bridges the transition between earlier and later phases of American numismatics. It stands at the threshold of modern coin collecting before the revolutionary state quarters program launched in 1999. The Washington quarter of 1984 preserves the classic eagle reverse, which would soon give way to designs representing each state. For those who lived through the 1980s, the eagle reverse quarter remains a nostalgic reminder of simpler times. The San Francisco proof quarters of 1984 stand apart in their mirrored fields and frosted devices crafted with polished dies and carefully handled planchets. They embody the highest standards of mint artistry and precision packaged for collectors. These coins were never meant for everyday circulation, yet they represent an important segment of American coinage appealing to hobbyists who valued craftsmanship, presentation, and scarcity compared to the mass-produced business strikes. The economic role of the 1984 quarter was immense in a pre-digital world where cash dominated. Even small denominations had major significance. Vending machines often required quarters, arcades thrived on them, laundromats depended on them, and toll booths collected millions. Each day, the quarter was arguably the most versatile and useful coin in circulation, occupying a central place in American daily life far beyond its modest face value. Over time, the 1984 Washington quarter has gained appreciation among collectors, not because it is rare, but because it represents continuity. It tells the story of how a coin introduced in 1932 survived, changes in composition, economic upheavals, and artistic debates to remain firmly entrenched in American culture. Its value today depends on condition, mint mark, and whether it has unique errors, while circulated examples are generally worth their face value. Uncirculated and proof specimens, especially those graded highly by professional services, can command a premium among enthusiasts. To hold a 1984 Washington quarter is to connect with the everyday life of mid-1980s America. It links us with the technology, the culture, the economy, and the artistic traditions of the time. It embodies the persistence of George Washington's image on coinage, the dedication of mint workers who struck hundreds of millions of coins with precision, and the ongoing narrative of American money which evolves, yet always looks back to its roots. The 1984 Washington quarter may seem like a common coin, but when studied deeply, it becomes an artifact that tells stories of design, politics, economics, and national identity.